Hello everyone, and welcome to the Think Tank. In light of the recent events that have been going on in the government, they're talking about whether they should raise the debt ceiling, whether they should increase or decrease deficit spending, and worries about inflation. One really has to look if the current system of economics, especially within the developed world, is the proper system. And that is the Keynesian system. The Keynesian system is based on central government economic planning, extensions of credit with low interest, cheap money. And the question really has to be asked if this is the proper system, especially in the current economic times that we're in today. Now, the best way to look at this, to see if this is the proper system, is to look at it from an unbiased perspective and to look at the biggest crises that we've had in history. Because a big crisis usually tells you not only what caused the crisis itself, but what got us out of it. So if you look at the crises, the recent crisis, you look at 1907, that was a terrible banking crisis, market crash. And if you look at this crisis, we have something called a fractional banking system. And the fractional banking system basically means that if all depositors wanted to take their money out at once, there wouldn't be enough money because there's only a certain amount of reserves that the bank have. So what happened was, in this crisis, a lot of people needed their money. That's the first thing that usually happens. People need money, they go to the bank and start to take their money out. The bank doesn't have enough money, and then it causes a lot of problems. So what happened was, in 1907, along came a man named J.P. Morgan. He came along, took some of his money. He was confident that if he took his money, made loans, that the market would recover, and he would make money himself by getting paid back with interest. He did this. Private involvement, government not involved, private involvement, made the loans, they were paid back, and it recovered in just about 2 months. This is what the free market does. And if something happens, things slow down, somebody has to get involved. When it's a private industry, he's biased because he knows when he puts his money in, he's making a good investment. But if government does it, look what's happened recently, right? So free market forces not only end this crisis, but ended in just about 2 months. Then we had another crisis, a really big crisis in 1921. We had a stock market crash. Now what happened was, Harding was the president, and despite the criticism he took as president, he made a very, very important move, a brilliant move, which is really no move at all. It's called the leave it alone approach that was actually spoken about by Secretary Mellon. And he agreed. Leave it alone approach, and the market recovered just about in a year and a half. Now following this, we had something called the roaring 20s. Now what was roaring about? A lot of spending, a lot of credit that was being injected into the market. And as a result of, we had a lot of things that were being purchased, and the problem was with all the credit and the money coming in, businesses have expenses. And the way economics works is you have to have enough production, an amount of dollars chasing a certain amount of goods, and if that doesn't happen, businesses also have expenses, and then you have inflation involved and the money supply. So the problem is that you get an imbalance, and businesses have to pay their expenses, and they can't cover their expenses. Businesses fail. And then that's the worst thing. When businesses fail, they have employees. They lose their jobs, right? What do? They start to take their money out. So the first things they start to take their money out is stocks. A lot of these stocks are being traded on margin. So the losses were exponentiated. The losses were even more than they would be if they were just 100% liquid investments. A lot of the money was borrowed. It was lent out, which made things a lot worse. So there was a serious bank crisis involved. As a result of that, you had the stock market crash. But despite all of this, in the 1930s, maybe some people don't even know this, unemployment was just about under 9%. Basically somewhere around where we are now. So it really wasn't that serious of a crisis. But despite this, Hoover, now the president, very much believed in central government economic planning. He was into deficit spending. He told companies not to lay off workers or cut wages. And then there was the Tariff Act that he signed into law in 1930, which really made things bad. Because what that did was it restricted trade. And then, of course, tariffs usually don't work because you have retaliatory tariffs. So this contracted the economy even more. Unemployment went up even higher. And then after that, you have FDR, who gets a lot of credit for his New Deal policies. And then, he was the war president. The war got us out of the Great Depression, but it did it indirectly. And you have all the policies that he instituted, the public works projects, and they have the New Deal, the seizing of gold, and then you have the minimum wage laws that he put in, banning teenage labor. But all this did was make companies more uncompetitive. It made them unprofitable. They just couldn't make money with all these regulations that were just strangling them. So unemployment skyrocketed, well over 20%. And, if you just look at the policies involved, it was such an unnecessary amount of suffering. My grandmother used to tell me, she was going to bed hungry. It was so unnecessary years. And look what the free market forces have done prior. They were ended shortly. And when you have government involved, look what happens. And why did the war get us out of the Great Depression? It did it indirectly. Because if you look at history, Federal Reserve Act started the Federal Reserve Bank, and they were supposed to be an emergency. It was a very important task that they had to put money into the economy because you had a fractional banking system, so depositors could take that money out. But what happened was, that didn't happen. Instead of releasing the money, they held on to it. The money was released because the money was needed to pay for the war. And once the money left, then the money spread out in the economy. So that's really why the war ended the Great Depression. This is really what caused the whole thing. And this is based on Keynesian economics. It's when the government gets involved and institutes all these regulations and institutes all this credit that goes to the economy. And like I said, if you look at history, history is perfectly clear. You look at the crises that I've mentioned, the ones that were caused, it was caused usually by central government economic planning, Keynesian economics. And if you look at the things that ended them, it was the free markets, the ones that ended them quickly. And when you had Keynesian economics, it extended the crisis and took a lot longer. So it's like a mixed martial arts fight. You have the Keynesian versus the Austrian school. So guys, let's talk about this fight. Beginning of the fight, you have the Keynesian coming on very strong. He's coming in with a left hook, a straight right, jabs. Guns are blazing, brawling, going for takedowns. He continues to attack first round, second round, still very strong. Has all this cardio because of the injection of credit that's in his body. All this cardio keeps on coming and coming. So this may go on maybe 2-3 rounds. But what happens is the Keynesian starts to run out of cardio. His mouth is wide open, he's taking deep breaths, and the assault doesn't seem to be coming. He's slowing down because there's no substance behind it. It's all stimulus that's going into this fighter. The heart isn't there, the drive isn't there. It's synthetic stimulus. It's like this illusion that's making him look like better than he really is. And then what happens is people see how good he is in the first, second round. They jump on his back, they ride his shoulders. This is the guy that we want. Look how good he's doing. We're going to put money on him. Now we'll bet that he's going to win. But what happens is the real heart, the real drive, the legitimate economy, the Austrian school combatant starts to counterattack. And what happens is around the third, fourth round, maybe fourth round, he starts to take over the fight. And the Keynesian starts to really slow down, and then the Austrian school starts to counterattack, starts to fight him, and eventually he takes the Keynesian down, puts his arm around his neck, and then he slaps on a rear naked choke, and the Keynesian taps out because there's nothing left. There's nothing else backing it. The true economic forces aren't there. The ingenuity isn't there. The intelligence, the innovation, the drive, the hard work, which is what makes an economy, is not in the Keynesian. It's in the free market. It's in the Austrian school. And declaring the winner by rear naked choke, the Austrian School of Economics. He is the winner. And that's how it happens. That's basically how it happens. And the point is like this. If you look at history, like I said, it's perfectly clear. What makes a true economy is not an intervention of credit, of illusion, and then you have an illusion, and based on that illusion, you have people working in the illusion, which makes it worse because when the illusion is no longer there, those people lose all their jobs based on that illusion, the illusionary economy. And then you have an economy that shouldn't really be there. And it's just like what happened in the automotive industry. Because of the policies, regulations, and other reasons, they couldn't produce a vehicle that was competitive. So as a result of that, they should have been into bankruptcy, restructure, and work on the things they need to be competitive. But instead, the government gets involved, they get a bailout, and then what happens is they just continue what they're doing. And this is Keynesian economics, when the government gets involved, when free markets are the system that should be involved to dictate where an economy goes. So in my opinion, it's the Austrian school, it's free market economics, which is the true system, it's the legitimate system. It's a system that should dictate where an economy goes and how it grows. We should not have booms and busts. We should have an economy which grows based on the innovations, the intelligence, the ingenuity, and the drive of the people. That's where an economy is supposed to grow. Not based on a synthetic economy, an illusion, where things start to be pumped up and get bailed out, and you have this synthetic growth, and then it explodes, and then there's this feeling this great exhilaration where you have a very strong economy, but it really isn't there, and then it falls very hard. So that is the perspective of the think tank. I would like to know your perspective. Please leave your comments, and thank you for tuning in.